Yes, that is my real name, Bruce Lee Money. We'll talk more about that later. April 2021. It's been a year since a microscopic mutated virus had reduced almost all of humanity to a shivering, trembling mess. Scared, worried, insecure, uncertain what came next. And we were the lucky ones. Remember I said that, the lucky ones. Because as professional musicians, we hadn't played a real gig in almost a year. As business owners, we had been forced to watch the destruction and the loss of some of the physical spaces that we had set with years of effort before that. As a parent, I was challenged. Both of our kids tested positive for the virus, and even though they had mild symptoms, we didn't know what to expect. As a child, I was fearful. My 80-year-old mother lived with us, and I wanted at all costs to avoid her getting ill. As a reasonable, socially conscious human being, I also spent most of every day in a state alternating between anger, fear, sadness, helplessness, hopelessness. And as just another fragile bag of jelly that had somehow evolved to think and to consider the meaning of the universe, I also felt guilty because even at the end of all of this, I knew I was lucky. I was far luckier than those without homes, those without friends, those without hospital beds, those without oxygen, and those without shoes on 500-mile treks to get back home. So in short, things were quite foobarred. If you don't know what foobar is, ask ChatGPT and see what comes up. But I was lucky again to have met and married a wise woman who, across the years, has put up with a lot of this, oh, I'm a creative person, so I'm different kind of bullshit. And, but she looked at me and said, you know what? You've got to do something creative with all of this negative energy that's building up inside of you, because if you don't, you're going to drive yourself and the rest of us mad. So get to work, goddammit. Thankfully, I listened. And so began a self-inflicted odyssey, a creative journey, a spiritual adventure, if you will. Because on April 30th, 2021, I resolved, just out of the blue, to write one song every day for the next 30 days. I would start on May the 1st, Labor Day, and I would write one song every day for 30 days. Now, I'd never done this before, and this, I mean, a song every day for 30 days. I had some proven competence in the field after having played in a band for 20 plus years, written many songs, put out many albums, toured the world, all that. But I've not done this before. And a lot of that creative expression before was done in, carefully controlled moments of inspiration, where the inboxes and the outboxes are clear, the schedule is completely reorganized, the candles are burning, and the essential oils are bubbling quietly in the corner. The children are shushed, you know what I'm talking about. So it's all very carefully set up creative time, right? Not this kind of relentless, everyday need to put something out, this gun-to-the-head model of working. But I was committed, and I decided to go for it. Song 1 comes fairly quickly. I remember opening up the news on that day, and the lyrics pretty much wrote themselves. It would become a song that would be called We're All We've Got, and that would become the title of the album, more on that later. The song became a 1-minute song, a ditty, if you will, but it seemed complete somehow. It seemed appropriate for that day's events and my musical outpouring for that day. Right? And here, let me take a little aside to take you through the process of writing a song. Now, for me, usually it starts with words, and this is not a strict rule in these kind of things. But for me, usually songs start with words because the words inform the melody, the rhythm, the chord structure, all of that comes after. So here I am sitting with these lyrics. I've got my guitar and I'm tinkering with some, melodies and chords and structures till I find something that I kind of like. And then I proceed to record something called a demo, which could be done on a phone or with some basic recording equipment. Now this demo basically immediately gives me an objective appraisal of the piece of music that's evolving, and I can make changes as I see fit. And once again, I was lucky enough at that point to have a whole bunch of recording equipment at home, simply because the company that I worked with was unlucky to lose studios and all that gear had to go somewhere, so it came home. So after the demo is recorded, we get into the final recording where I am performing multiple instruments. I play guitar, I play a little bit of bass, I sing, play a little bit of piano, some synthesizer, program some drums. You understand, again, I was doing this all alone, sitting at home, right? May 2021. And once the recording is done and I'm happy with the results, then we get into something called the mix, which is basically arranging all these recording elements, processing them, working with them to present the final listening experience that is desired. After the mix comes something called the master. And while all this is going on, I'm also shooting video to document this whole thing because I know that I have to share this with the world, and video is one of the best ways to do that. So yeah, there's video shooting going on while this is all happening. So the master comes next, which is basically a process by which the output is made to sound good in a variety of listening environments. So it'll sound good on your laptop speaker, on your phone speaker, on headphones, in your car, or in some fancy music system that you might own. Right. After that comes, of course, the video edit, syncing up the audio and the video, all that stuff, posting it up on all these ever-hungry social platforms that we all use to access our audience. So this was a daily process that now had to get going. And this was all happening with a business still to run, right? There were still online classes that I was conducting. There were innumerable Zoom meetings for strategy and planning and damage control and whatever else that was going on. And again, we were lucky to have some outstanding members in the team to pick up the slack whenever there was any. I have an outstanding co-conspirator, the drummer in the band, my partner in time for the last year, 26 years, and who gave me his support and for which I'll always be thankful. Anyway, so song 2 comes along, and it's also not too difficult. And in a few days, I've managed to set up a kind of routine, a ritual, if you will. And I'm becoming more and more confident that I can actually pull this off. This is actually possible to do. And that inspires me to up the ante a little bit. So I say, okay, I'm going to now try and write in styles and genres that I haven't explored before. So I tried doing some things in a cappella, in spoken word, in hip-hop, in different things I haven't done before. I'm pushing the envelope. And I was being surprised by the results because somehow the limitations were also liberating in a way. But what also surprised me was the response. Now, I was uploading these things on social media, of course, and I am no social media maven. I have microscopic followings on all these fancy platforms. But it was interesting to see that very soon I had hundreds and then thousands of views on every one of these things that I was putting out. And apart from the immediate dopamine hit that engenders, what really got to me was the pouring of love and support from friends, colleagues, strangers from all over for this thing that I was doing. People would send me lyrics, they would send me verses, they would send me pictures, they'd send me stories, they'd send me thank you notes saying that, hey, you know what, the song you just sang really kind of encapsulated the experience I just had. Now this was something I had never experienced as a creative professional before. By week 2, spontaneous organic collaborations had started happening. Somebody would send me a lyric and I would transfer that into a song. And the next day somebody else would take that song, make a cover version and put that up. More lyrics and ideas and things would follow. And what became interesting at this point was that it didn't feel like I was doing this alone. It was no longer just me. It was a community. It was a village. It was a village doing this together. And as part of that, there's one experience that I have to talk about. So in 2017, we were lucky again to visit New Zealand for a small vacation. And driving through breathtaking South Island. We happened to spend a night in a motel, and we made a connection with the owner because he happened to be a musician too. 4 years later, in 2021, as I'm halfway through this process, we get a call from this couple that runs the motel, just inquiring about how we're doing, because they've seen the news and they've seen how bad things are over here, and they want to know how we're doing. And they have a little proposal, because they know we've been locked up for a couple of months, and they say, we want to try and get you out of your house. And we're wondering what that is. The next day, they get their phones out, they make a video call, they put that phone on their car, and then for the next 2 hours, they drive around this area in New Zealand called Lake Tekapo, which is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And they drive around, they get out of their car, they walk, they make snowmen, they show us things that even the most die-hard tourists and explorers would not have seen, because these are locals from there. The five of us sitting at home spent those 2 hours in joy. We were choked up then, and it still chokes me up now when I think about it. It was a small thing, but it made a big difference at that time. And I'm talking about this just in terms of getting us out of our homes. So many such kindnesses from completely unknown people saved lives in this period, right? The next day's song, of course, was called The Kindness of Strangers. And it's one of the 2.5-minute songs on the album, and it's a key moment in the album. And so it goes. The relentless work and effort every day kept my mind out of the negative spiral of thoughts that can often happen at times like this. Sure, the anger, the sadness, the hopelessness, helplessness, all that continued because the crap hadn't stopped, still happening. But all of them found ways of nesting inside words and music in ways that kind of defanged them without them losing any of their power. Very interesting, I thought. And the village, the community that had kind of sprung up around this is what pulled us through. And even having been a musician for 20 years before that, I was making connections with listeners and people that I had never made before. And for all the collaborators that contributed, words, music, saxophone, whatever, it really underlined to me the magic of this thing that was happening. So what do we get out of all of this? I mean, all of you silent, attentive people out there, what do you take away from this? How is this going to make sense in your own journeys, this personal little odyssey of mine? Well, I've tried to boil it down to 4 things. Number 1, creative self-expression can lead to spiritually uplifting, life-changing journeys. And when I say creative self-expression, I don't mean the traditional ideas of creative things like art or dance or music or poetry or whatever. As human beings, we're endlessly creative. You know, arranging the stuff on your desk, that's creative. Making a meal for someone you like, that's creative. Seeing a couple of random words on a hoarding or on a newspaper and conjuring up a meaning that wasn't initially intended, that's creative. Choosing and arranging some plants on a little home balcony, that's creative. We can't help it. As human beings, we are kind of hardwired to constantly create these kinds of things, right? And we are relentlessly creative. So let's stop telling ourselves that, oh, I'm not an artist. All of us are, right? And there's now actually some evidence to support the assumption, and this evidence is from James Webb and quantum field dynamic theory or whatever, that all of us spontaneously create our own reality with every waking conscious moment. Disprove that, right? So we're creators, and recognizing and engaging with this creative side of ourselves makes our lives better, guaranteed. Number 2, engaging with this artistic and creative side of ourselves can transform our personal narratives from inward necessity to outward hope. Personal narratives are incredibly important. They're selfish. They're necessary to craft the stories that we tell ourselves and tell others, right? And these stories, as soon as we share them, they stop being just our stories. They become part of the village. They become part of shared, honest, lived experience. And, you know, we live in a world right now where there seem to be so many threats to our very humanity. There is technology and And the same desire to share, to connect, to communicate, to bond, to be part of a tribe, this same desire has been, monetized and corrupted by every, billion-dollar unicorn social media startup or whatever, and for all the wrong reasons. And if we understand the right reasons, we're better for it. And then you throw AI into the mix and things look even scarier, but they don't have to be. Let's recognize that very soon the machine is going to write, paint, draw, color, compose, and arrange things much better than us. But the machine isn't going to have honest lived experience. For those of you who remember that movie, The Matrix, even in that dystopian vision of an AI-controlled future, the only way things work is with lived experience, however illusory that is, right? So this may actually all be a simulation, but it might completely break down if the simulation were to end, right? So number 3, limitations can be the alligator clips on the battery of creativity. Yes, I like that line. So imposing limitations on a creative process, I'm not saying that that kind of process is any less or any more than any other kind of process, but it can result in some surprising things that emerge, right? Try and write a song with just 1 chord, write a poem with just 5 words, cook a meal with just 2 ingredients, draw something with just straight lines, paint something with just 1 color. You'd be surprised that some of the learnings you get from these limited creative processes, how they can transfer and move upward when you have more unrestricted processes happening. Try that. Number 4, luck throws us many adventures, and we've got to be prepared to work our butts off when that happens. So I've used luck several times across my little talk here. That's because I think we don't recognize just how inordinately large of a role luck and random chance play in all of our lives, right? The very arrangement of DNA that is in the fibers of your being, the people you meet and work with, fall in love with, marry, every success, every failure, so much of all of those things are tied into random occurrences. And as we grow as thinking, conscious beings, the only thing we come to realize is that all we're doing is finding a way to respond in the right way to things that happen to us, right? We've got to have the strength and the desire and the ability to work hard enough to accept what life happens to us while we're busy making other plans. So yes, my 30-day songwriting journey resulted in an album called We're All We've Got, Songs from a Pandemic. But more than anything, it gave me a spiritual adventure, a spiritual journey that will nourish me for years to come, perhaps my whole life. It's a story that I tell myself when, it's a story I tell myself when the candles are burning low. It's a story I tell myself when the essential oils have all evaporated. It's a story I tell myself when the inbox is too full. And it's perhaps a story that might inspire someone else to creatively tell their own. Thanks.